being a BB trainee. So we thought that this discussion could be quite interesting for you guys. To give a very, very brief introduction, so David Coleman is working at Mars. He's the Vice President of the Public Affairs Europe, so working a lot with the European Commission, among others. I met David while I was working in Mars as well. We never worked together, but David was my mentor, and I had excellent experience and souvenir of all the discussion we had. He was extremely good as mentoring me and helping me. I think today the topic of the session was the Green Deal, but we also want be beyond this. We really want to bring you the experience of how you can build a career, starting with this BB traineeship program, and then just take advantage of all the learnings to be successful in your professional path. David, I let you go on, and thank you again very much for being with us today. I think we can't hear you, David.
And there you go. That's my first mistake. We'll see if there are many more during the session. I hope not, but let me know. So thank you very much, Sophie. It's and Leah and everybody else on the committee who organized the job fair. So I'm delighted to be here today and to have this opportunity to chat with you. Of course, the intervention was labeled in the program as a keynote speech, so that's already quite daunting, but doesn't really make for a chat. But let's see how we get on. I mean, if I stop talking before the end of the allotted 30 minutes, we can open it up for conversation and a chat, and you can put your questions on the chat box that Leah will then put to me, and Sophie will manage any chats that we need to have post speech. Okay, so as I said, I do want to thank the Blue Book trainees and the European Commissions for supporting these couple of days. And I say that, one, because it's no mean feat to do this with so many people over 5 days in a virtual way. And so that is well deserved. And I would say it shouldn't be taken for granted. This is not something the Commission or the Blue Book trainees have to do. They choose to do it. And I saw in the program that it's for trainees who strive for more. So if you're all here, and at last count 92 of you, you're all striving for more. So that's super encouraging. I've been a Blue Book trainee, so I remember where my head was at when I came to this stage in the stage. And one of the questions I had for myself is, what the hell am I going to do next? We're in that case often at the beginning of a career, so it looks like a massive mountain to climb, and the ambiguity and that anxiety that drives can be quite daunting. So, but the question, what am I going to do next? Let me just do a little apartheid. I think it's a very interesting question. And I think based on my 20 years experience in the EU public affairs realm, it's a question one should never stop asking. What do I want to do next? Yeah. Status quo can be good. It can be a good feeling to have. The feeling of I have arrived, I feel great, it's quite comfortable. But in my experience, the I have arrived is quite a fickle feeling. It's a very temporary sentiment. I think satisfaction in continuous development, satisfaction in continuous personal growth is in many regards more enduring than the status quo and the feeling of I have arrived. So what am I going to do next is a very important question. You know, continuous development, asking yourself that question often doesn't have to be tiring. It doesn't have to be exhausting, thinking that it's a constant race of next. It doesn't have to be like that. But that's back to something that I'll talk about later, is where do you get your energy from? Do you get your energy from the comfort zone of I have arrived and I'm not going to go anywhere else? Or do you get your energy from continuous development? But today, I thought I'd give you quite an unvarnished picture of my own personal journey and how it led me to where I am on my professional and personal journey. I'll talk about a couple of things that I realized along the way, a couple of things that have helped me have a degree of serenity in my outlook on my career. And I like to think that despite the 20 years that have passed, I still have 20 more to go. So that's quite exciting too. I hope. So my journey, I'm Irish, as some of you may have recognized from my accent, although the Irish brogue has been tamed over the years. I've been living in France. I lived in France for over 23 years. So my French is as good or better than my English. I'm Irish, but I moved to France in 1985 with my parents, thinking we would stay for a couple of years and go back to Ireland. But in fact, we stayed for 25 to 28 years. Now, as a kid, I was super interested in understanding how things work. Why are things the way they are? Now, I focused then in on not why does the sun come up and set. I focused on why is it when I go into a boulangerie and I give a couple of coins, I can get some candy in return? What is it that makes that possible? So I was very analytical and inquisitive about how do these things work in society. And I came to understand that it was because of a thing called law. There's a contract that is concluded and it's regimented by a law that is decided by some people who've been elected. So law became sort of an obsession of mine, as I saw it as the framework that helped us in this society operate and connect together. So I had law in my mind, and I decided I wanted to become a lawyer because it would cover that inquisitive nature about how things work, and also another dimension of myself, which is fairness. Being just was something also quite a driver of my own personality and what energized me. So combining fairness and law made me want to be a lawyer. And I decided that pretty early on. And that's what I set out to do. And but on that journey, I became more engaged with the bar, not the bar, but the bar, as in the legal profession. And actually, then I saw, do you know what? I am interested in applying the law and making sure it's applied properly for others, but it's actually more interesting to know how the laws are made. What does it take to create a law? What are the choices that are made to create a law the way it is to achieve the objective that it wants to achieve? So again, very curious about that. So I did my legal studies all the way to a pre-doctoral master's degree in France in European law. And it was European law almost by nature, because I was an Irish guy living in France. I was different from my French colleagues because I didn't have an ID card. I had a European citizen's residence card, which was a bit different than everybody else, that I had to renew every 10 years. So I felt that there was a little difference there. So it got me interested in Europe, law, European law, European community law. And so that's what I studied. I won my place in the Blue Book. I know you all won your place in the Blue Book, but I really won it. I mean, I won it in a competition. In part of my master's course was to do a mock trial competition for francophone universities around the world on human rights called René Cassin. And with the group of misfits that we were in my master's course, we actually got to the final. A little bit by chance, but because I think of a disruptive way of thinking and tackling the case. And one of the prizes was directly a place in the Blue Book. So that was great. And from there, I was really privileged to get a traineeship in the cabinet of Commissioner David Byrne, who was the commissioner for consumer protection, public health and consumer protection. And it was the beginning of real consumer protection policy at a European level. Just so happens I did my thesis on consumer protection after the Amsterdam Treaty. Is it expansion or status quo? So it sort of fit quite well. So great experience. I'm sure you're all having great experiences in your own traineeships. Maybe it's beyond your expectations, maybe it doesn't meet your expectations, but one thing is for sure, this is something that you have gained. This is an experience that is valuable in terms of what you learn, and it has value on your CV, especially if you want to operate in one way or the other in European affairs. So when it came towards the end of my stage to decide what to do next, I mean, at that stage, it was very clear for me, I wanted a job that paid me money. That was the driver. I was 20-something, I needed money to have my flat and all of that. So that was very clear. But I had figured as well through my traineeship that I actually wanted to stay in the EU bubble or EU affairs because I liked it. It felt good. So it felt good to be able to engage in areas that actually impacted over 400 million people. One way or the other, that's what we're dealing with. It felt good to be part of a project that actually brought people together. So this is where, when you're thinking about what energizes you, what do I actually want to achieve? My thought was, well, I like being part of something that's transcending borders. Something that is actually breaking down borders and bringing people together, ushering in an era of peace among countries who have never had such a lengthy period of peace before. It's quite impressive. It's an absolutely impressive undertaking, and I liked being part of that, one way or the other. Now, I thought about joining the EU institutions because what's more laudable than the mission of public service? It's a beautiful thing to be at the service of the public, and in a European context to serve over 400 million people. I also thought about joining an NGO because another driver is personal purpose, having a positive impact on the world. And I think once you get beyond the fact of, yes, I need money because I need to pay the mortgage, or at least be able to have a mortgage, you start thinking about deeper things, about what actually you want to achieve. Yeah. And it's about legacy, it's about your own personal purpose. And I think it's an important reflection to have. So NGOs was one consideration, or indeed other international organizations. And I think one of the great things about this job fair is that you have the wide gamut of potential professions or avenues for you to think about. And international organizations, I know, are part of that too. But then there was another one that I thought about, which was the private sector. Because thinking about it, the private sector today, it has evolved over time. So today we have companies that have a scale that is unimaginable, or wouldn't have been imaginable, let's say 30 or 40 years ago. I mean, the company I work for today, Mars Incorporated, has creates as much CO2 emissions as Panama. So when you talk about private sector and scale of impact, we're talking about massive impacts. Another company I worked for, McDonald's, it uses as many potatoes as can be grown in Sweden. So we're talking about massive scale here. I mean, McDonald's has the only companies or entities that have more employees than McDonald's is the Chinese Army, Walmart, and the NHS. And then it's Mickey D's. So you're talking big scale. So private sector. And the private sector was an interesting one for me to think about, because I was in the mindset that the private sector is here only to maximize shareholder profit. That's its goal. That's what it sets out to achieve. That's the only thing it sets out to achieve. But in fact, when engaging with corporates, you realize that actually, it's not exactly true. It's not only true, and it's not true of all companies. There are a lot of companies out there that actually want to do more than maximizing shareholder profit. In fact, if you look at what a corporate objective is, you go 50, 60 years ago, it wasn't about maximizing shareholder profit. It was about solving the problems of people profitably, which is a very, very different dimension. And I believed that private sector, when pursuing a different purpose beyond financial capital, but pursuing a purpose of building natural capital and social capital, it can indeed be a force for good. And it has impact across a region. And it is an actor in the implementation and in the fine-tuning of European legislation. Yeah. And in fact, private sector, and my job is to talk to the Commission and the Parliament and to have conversations about mutual benefits. The goal that you're trying to achieve in terms of example, make sure that consumers have all the adequate consumer nutrition information when they choose to eat a product. We agree. We agree with you, and because you want to design that law, let us tell you how it could be done the best so that it resonates with consumers. So there is a mutuality of benefits of private sector engaging with the public sector on the creation of, the application of, and the execution of EU legislation. This speech was under the heading of Green Deal. Now, I wouldn't do justice to such a milestone policy drive, which is once in a generation in terms of seismic change of how we approach our societies. But the purpose of the Green Deal fits very well with the purpose of a lot of private sector companies. And private sector, the companies are the ones who will be the companies will be the ones who make the Green Deal a success. A Green Deal cannot be a success without the cooperation of the private sector. And the good news is, and where I'm happy, is that the company I work for is hell-bent on ensuring that we do achieve what the Green Deal sets out to achieve, which is a carbon neutral region by 2050. And then the other ensuing policy areas, farm to fork, the most sustainable food system in the world. Yes, absolutely. Let's do that, and let's discuss how we can get there with a degree of serenity. Yeah? So, you know, that's sort of the journey I was on. Of course, I could go into more detail. That might be part of the ensuing chat that we might have. But I came to believe that there's more than, and please don't repeat this, I do work for the world's biggest pet care company. There's more than one way to skin a cat. Yeah. So if you're clear on what you personally want to achieve for yourself and your impact on your family and broader, the world or the region or the country you're in, be open and be curious. There are more ways to get there than just the EU institutions. Now, don't get me wrong, EU institutions is extremely laudable and very rewarding, being the public service that it is. But be open. I mean, here's a couple of tips, if I may, if I could be so bold. An important thing at this stage, I believe, is to manage anxiety. Manage your own anxiety. That question, what am I going to do next? That big mountain that's out there in front of you, it isn't actually that big. But take the time to manage your anxiety. You might be at the beginning of a professional career, but what comes next is unknown or ambiguous. That can drive anxiety, and don't let that feeling dominate you. As I said earlier, keep an open mind. There are opportunities out there, and we are going to enter a recession like we haven't seen before due to COVID, but there are still opportunities out there for people operating in the sphere that I think the Blue Book tells me you want to operate in. And in fact, this we need the best and the brightest minds, more now maybe even than before, because we're going to have to not only manage a recession, we're going to have to manage to come out of a recession in a way that is different than we were before, shifting away from a world where we maximize shareholder profit only into something more than that. And the combination of a commission push for Green Deal and everything that goes with that, we need people like you, if you embrace that idea, to be operating and pushing that agenda, also in the private sector. Keep an open mind, stay curious. Always consider that any step you take after this stage is just one step. And a career is based on multiple steps. And you can always course correct a step you take. It's not a problem. Time is on your side. So be curious, look at what is out there, and it's what you're doing here now. And I encourage you to continue to do that. But always have in mind what destination, what are the major principles that drive you to get where you want to go. And another thing that I've learned in corporate life, unfortunately, at law school, at least in my day, they were really, really bad at it, which is about know yourself. You know, knowing yourself is the surest path to be on a development journey that works for you and that has the biggest chance of success. There are, and you may already know this, but there are different tools out there to know yourself. There's one called Myers-Briggs, but there are many others. And what they call personality type preference tests, what they do is they start rationalizing things that you probably already know about yourself. Oh, I'm an introvert, I'm analytical, I'm close to people, that's where I get my energy from. But knowing yourself helps you guide and understand where do you get your energy from. Personally, I'm an introvert. You know? So when asked the question, if you could do one thing this weekend, you know, nothing holding you back, would you go out to a restaurant with a group of 50 friends, or would you stay at home, watch a nice movie on Netflix, chomping on some popcorn? I'd probably go for the latter. Yeah. But I know that, and knowing that doesn't stop me from having the necessary degree of extroversion to do the job that I do, which is actually all about engaging with people. So know yourself. I think it's a very important dimension in all of this. Now, I see that we have 6 minutes left, and if I may, I'll leave it open for a couple of questions. So back to Leah and Sophie for any questions you may have.
Yeah, you want to take over? I think there's some question in the chat room.
I mean, you can do it. It's either way is fine. I might just read that one out. So
okay.
Obviously, thank you, David. It's been a pleasure listening to you sharing your path as of now. And a question would be whether Mars offers trainings before starting a job. And do people who want to try something new have a chance of getting a job if they don't necessarily have the background for it?
Okay, so let me try to address that. So does Mars offer trainings before starting the job? Well, I mean, Mars has a graduate training program, a very extensive one, not in the area of public affairs, but in the areas of commercial, supply chain, managing a factory. There's a lot of graduate training programs there, absolutely, and a very robust one. Not in the area of public affairs. And actually the training is a great program because it allows people to, if they're successful, to take a journey that will take them to 4 or 5 different countries along their graduate training program over, I think, 1 to 2 years. So it's quite an impressive program. Now, if the question is, can I do like a traineeship before I decide whether I want to work for you or not? That's, I would say that's not generally the principle.
No.
that's what a trial period is for, you know.
Yeah, that's not what we are doing now.
Yeah. So that's what trial periods are for.
David, we have a lot of questions on the trainee. So what I could do is actually gather all those questions, and maybe we can, you and I connect, and we can try to address that. So I will go back then to the trainee. There's a couple of questions I think are really in tune with what you exchanged with us. Do you have any advice for someone who's changing career path? By the way, I'm in there too. And there was another question about the age. When does the age? When are we too old to pursue such a career? I guess like yours. When does age become a disadvantage? I could address that, but I would love to hear what you could tell us about the age parameters.
Okay, so the first question was about changing career paths. It's an important question. I think in today's society, less and less people stay on the same type of career. You don't join a company for 40 years and then retire. It's pretty rare. Changing career paths, the more you're advancing in your career, unless you make a complete break and you start doing patchwork instead of drafting laws, I would advise to try and make sure that there is a French expression would be a fil rouge, some level of connectedness between where you were and where you want to go. Now that can be the substantive thing you're doing in your career, or it can be a personal drive. Yeah? But you need to dig a little bit and to understand what is that fil rouge and what are your motivators. If you want a complete break, then it's a different story. It's a gamble. It's possible, but it's something different. When are we too old to pursue such careers, and when does age become a disadvantage? Well, I tend to think that age is always an advantage, because with age usually comes wisdom, and wisdom, if there's anything we need more of in this world, is wisdom. But often what comes with age is career progression and a certain level of salary. And so for future employers, if you're at a certain level of salary and you're changing paths, it might be hard to choose between somebody who may be 50 years old and somebody who is 25 years old. It's not impossible, but it may be a consideration. It doesn't make it necessarily easier. I don't think age is a disadvantage.
No, I don't think.
It can be sold as bringing with it wisdom and experience that we need a lot of.
David, I'm sorry, because we are really touching at the end of the session. Is there anything we can do to wrap up in 1 minute? And I will get back to you with all the remaining questions anyway.
To wrap up in 1 minute, I'm just taking a picture here of the screen. So from my own history. I think top tips: know yourself deeply, what you're good at, what you're less good at. Be intentional on your development journey in everything you do, very intentional about it. It doesn't need to really be conscious and open.
Sorry, you just lost the connection for a second, but we're back now.
Okay.
Thank you though. Thank you so much for this really, really interesting insight that you have given us in your path. And I gathered the questions and we'll get those to you.
Yeah, David, you have someone who just wrote to you soul in Irish, so just
yes.
Voilà.
Okay,
David.
You're very welcome.
Thank you so much for making time in your agenda for us. It was awesome. I didn't have any doubt about it, but thank you. And we'll speak later. Thank you, guys. Thank you guys for joining the session. Thank you, Leah. Bye-bye.
Cheers. Bye-bye. Take care.